And good evening. Thank you so much for watching Life Ahead on PBS Fort Wayne. This, of course, is a program that is for our audience of all ages. And we're going to talk about something very important tonight, managing end-of-life affairs. A couple of experts on hand to talk to you about that. We have attorney Troy Kiefer. Great to have you back on the show.
Great to be here, Mark. Thanks.
Thank you. And Jarod Steffen, who is a licensed funeral director in the area. Nice to have you.
Thanks, Mark.
I think you were on maybe, a year ago or so?
I think so. About a year ago, yes.
Well, we had a great show then, and we thought, well, let's bring it back and try it again, because we have a lot of ground to cover, and it's a very important topic, because everyone should have these thoughts, and at least write it down, talk to a lawyer, talk to a funeral director, and maybe get some things established, because that time will come, but hopefully not today, tomorrow, next week, but it will come. So it's all part of life, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. I want to tell you, too, that we have a couple of ways that you can communicate to us. It is a viewer interactive program, and that means we want your questions and your comments. So you can do it a couple of ways. You can give us a call, and you can be on the air, but if you don't want to be on the air, we can transcribe your question, or you can text us. Those two numbers are on your screen right now. Now, when you text us, please give us your name, not necessarily a full name, but your first name and the town or city from where you're calling. We'd love to do a shout out. So do that, please, during the process of the program. It is public television. We don't stop down for commercials, so you have us for a whole half hour. And here we go. Let's go ahead and get started with you, Troy. How does elder law intersect with funeral planning, and why is this connection important for the families?
Yeah, I think the intersection with between elder law and funeral planning is that when you start thinking about one, it opens that door. It is somewhat of a difficult topic, obviously, for people to think about their end of life. And once they work up the courage to start thinking about that, they start thinking about wills, and that eventually leads to also funeral planning.
And Jarod, when pre-planning a funeral, what roles does a funeral home or a funeral director have to perform?
Yeah, so most funeral homes, they offer that as a free service. They open their doors to the public to come in and just basically start to have a conversation about the end-of-life planning, about funeral arrangements, or even gathering some information that we use to help complete things like the death certificate or the obituary. And so, yeah, we see every day the importance of having the planning done ahead of time. It makes a difficult time much easier, and so we do our very best just to try to, again, accommodate people that want to come and talk about it.
Funeral directors have a tough job, and we have to have them, but most of the ones I've met in my life have been very compassionate and very understanding. I want to go to you, Troy, about the legal documents. What documents should actually be in place to ensure a senior's funeral wishes are going to be honored?
Yeah, well, there are actually a couple of things. There is a funeral planning declaration, and that's a specific document that's recognized by state law, and it allows a person not only to designate their wishes, but to appoint somebody who can make decisions on things maybe that they hadn't foreseen. And another document that is really relatively new is an appointment of healthcare representative, and that entire area of law was revamped a few years ago, and it specifically includes that you can appoint someone to make funeral decisions for you after you pass.
Oh, great. And Jarod, from your perspective, since we're talking about this, what legal information do families most often misunderstand or misinterpret when they come to a funeral home to pre-plan?
Yeah, I think where people get tripped up sometimes, or there's some confusion, is more when a death occurs. And a lot of times if there is conflict within a family, or if someone in the family has been estranged, just because that happens, it doesn't take away their rights to make the funeral arrangement. So when a family gets things in order and talks with an attorney like Troy, they can get those. They can appoint who they want, and so that really helps us out a lot when that happens.
Right, and you're talking about a specific family member to discuss these things?
A lot of times it's a specific family member, or it can be a friend, it can be anyone, but typically it's a family member.
Okay, very good.
Mm-hmm.
And Troy, let's talk about power of attorney, because that's going to come up, I'm sure, a couple of times in this conversation. Explain how that power of attorney can assist in the funeral planning and the execution of it.
Well, I think while a person's alive, the power of attorney allows you to appoint someone else to make decisions for you in the event that you're not able to, that you're incapacitated, absent, otherwise not able to make those decisions. And as part of that broad-reaching power, the person named in the power of attorney can do pre-planning and make those decisions for the person who is incapacitated.
Okay, and the role of excuse me, the living will, how does that play at the end of life?
Yeah, in Indiana, that's a complicated question.
Yeah.
But a living will really talks about that last deathbed decision. So the doctor has said that there's little chance of recovery. Perhaps the person's only being kept alive with machines, and the living will allows someone to decide ahead of time that if that ever happens, that they would like to have that treatment withheld and that they be allowed to pass away naturally. And we are not using so much of a living will, but guiding people towards that appointment of healthcare representative that I mentioned earlier,
yes,
and giving them the authority to make that decision rather than just a cold piece of paper that you signed 15 years ago. Give that decision to the person that you trust. They can get the most current information from your doctors, and they know what you want because they've talked to you about it over the past number of years. So in my opinion, that's a better way to go than just a one-page living will. And
you mentioned sometimes they do it 15 years ago. Is it necessary to update that once every couple of years or so? Maybe talk to the attorney and just, especially if they have any changes or they change their mind?
There are a couple of times that I advise people to talk to their attorney when it comes to estate documents. The first time is any life change. So birth, death, divorce, any moving, especially to another state. Those are all good opportunities to speak with an attorney. And then other than that, it's just a good practice to meet every couple of years just to make sure that the law hasn't changed and negatively affected your documents.
True.
And you may have an attorney look at it and explain it to you and realize that it doesn't say what you thought it said.
Okay. And Jarod, how do funeral homes work with elder law attorneys to protect the client's wishes?
Yeah, well, again, just by, we communicate a lot, and the documents that they draw up, a lot of times when a family comes and speaks to us about pre-planning, we'll take those documents as well, we'll put them in their file, those that pertain to us as a funeral home. And so, yeah, there's a lot of communication and just making sure that the family's taken care of.
Right.
Yeah.
And if somebody has a power of attorney, that is really important as well. Is that correct?
Specifically a healthcare power of attorney or a healthcare representative, like Troy mentioned, the newer document. But yes, yeah, very important.
And that goes in the file, and of course, when the time comes, it's all there.
Yes,
all
that's
right. And Troy, I wanted to ask you about the families pre-arranging or pre-funding funerals and to ensure the compliance of Medicaid regulations. We're getting into a whole different ball field when it comes to Medicaid. So how does all that work?
Yeah. Medicaid is that program that people often use to pay for long-term care, so often nursing home care. And it is a means-tested program, meaning that they can only have a certain amount of assets that they own. And sometimes people have heard of a spend-down period to get down to that level. And part of that could be pre-arranging for your funeral. And pre-planning for it, because definitely that is an expense that Medicaid provides for, and I think really encourages people through their policy to follow through with.
Now, does Medicaid interfere or affect any type of, for instance, the wills someone has? Does that have any effect in it? I mean, is there a limit of money that can be spent for funerals when it comes to Medicaid?
Well, there is, and for that reason, I think we direct people, and Jarod, you can jump in because I think you probably talk
Sure.
to people more about this side than I do, but we direct people more towards funeral planning trusts because there isn't that limit that you can spend. It's as long as you've identified the services and you can prepay using that type of trust, and it takes that, generally takes that cap off of what can be spent on a funeral.
Yeah, because
that's right.
there is a cap. In fact, I've heard of families wanting to pitch in more money to maybe do more for a funeral, and sometimes I think, isn't there a cap when it comes to the Medicaid, what they offer?
Well, when not in the pre-planning. So when someone comes to us and they want to ultimately prepay their funeral, they can. There's no cap. The money goes though into a funeral trust. So when someone comes and prepays their funeral, they're not writing a check to a funeral home. They're actually writing a check to a trust company where the money is held until the death occurs. So when it's done in that fashion, there isn't a cap. It's typically the cap is more after a death occurs and someone is on Medicaid without a prepaid funeral.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see.
Yes.
I see the line.
Yes.
If you're just tuning in, we are talking about managing end-of-life affairs here on Life Ahead. The phone numbers to call or text are on your screen. Of course, give us your name and the location you're calling from when you give us a text. We'd appreciate that. And very interesting topic tonight because a lot of people don't want to think about this. And it's sometimes tragic because at the end of life, if a person hasn't discussed what they want as far as their funeral plans, well, then that leaves the family kind of hanging as to what dad or mom or whoever the loved one is. So the pre-planning aspect is so important, not only financially, but just for peace of mind, I would think. We have a call coming in, and it's in fact James is calling, and he's asking the earliest age you have to see someone healthy prepare a will. I'm reading that right? Earliest age you have seen, the earliest age you've seen someone healthy prepare a will.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Typically, there are 3 stages in life where we see people really think about preparing their wills. We have typically when someone gets married and they have children, they start thinking about the children and think, oh, well, we better go see an attorney to make sure that if something happens to us, that the guardians of our children are people that we choose. The second time that people really start thinking about it is a little later, about retirement age. They start looking at their wills and realize that they have that guardian language in there, and that their 30-year-old son, they're saying they have to go live with their uncle. That's a good sign that it probably needs to be updated. And then finally, about 20 years later, late 70s, early 80s, people are really starting to face end of life, and so they want to make sure things are all in order. But me personally, probably the earliest I've seen is maybe 24.
Okay.
23, 24, perhaps.
Yeah.
And there really is no age limit on it, and people, unfortunately, pass away at all ages.
Right.
And depending on the level of assets that a person has, it may make sense to do it that early.
And I would think that, especially if you got married and started having children, that would be a key time, no matter how young you are, a key time to at least talk about it and get something in writing.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yes.
Jarod, hinging on that, how can funeral homes assist families in understanding and complying with the state laws and regulations related to funerals and estates?
Yeah, well, I think just simply by sitting down, with either a pre-arrangement advisor prior, or of course when a death does occur, you'll be sitting down with a funeral director that is very much aware of the laws, and they can kind of walk you through all of those questions and steps. Yeah.
And I know most funeral homes nowadays have at least one person on hand who specializes in the pre-planning of funerals.
Yes,
That's
definitely.
a great thing. That's a great thing.
Absolutely.
Have another text coming in. It's don't have a name on it, but that's okay. It says, can you change power of attorney if you decide you want someone different? And what is the process, Troy?
Yeah, well, it looks like that's Tom from Columbia City.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, I want to make
Oh,
sure.
okay, there. Tom from Columbia City.
Yeah.
Thank you for texting that. Okay,
Make sure he got his moment of fame for texting in.
I appreciate that.
No, that is a good question, and there are two things that you need to do if you want to update a power of attorney. The first thing is create a new power of attorney, and it will have in there language that says that you revoke any previous powers of attorney that you might have signed. In addition to that, if the person in the previous power of attorney knew they were power of attorney, you have to notify them as well, typically in writing.
Okay.
A lot of people, a power of attorney is just a document in waiting. It's not actually being used, and they haven't really notified the person they've named. So in that case, notice is really not required. But if that person knows about it and they're actively working on your behalf, then they need to receive that notice in writing.
All right. And the options available for low-income seniors to fund their funeral expenses, and let's talk, if we can, aside from Medicaid, what other options are there?
That's a good question,
Oh.
and I'm not
Didn't
real
mean to
sure
throw
about
you.
that. Yeah, I know there are options for people who are destitute, but I don't know if you encounter that more often.
Yeah, not a lot. No.
Well, aren't there ways, though, when someone wants to plan a funeral, isn't there some sort of an insurance situation where people can pay and make payments?
They can. There are, yes, there are definitely options. So when you pre-play a funeral, you can set it up on a monthly payment. You can, and you can stretch that out 3, 5, 10 years, and so that can lower the payment, yes. And so after a funeral, after a death occurs, then the payment options aren't as lenient as before when pre-planning. So,
Right.
Yes.
So the earlier you pre-plan,
Yes.
I think the premiums would be a little lower.
Yes.
Wouldn't they be? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Karen has texted us, or actually called us, and she's offline. She wants us to ask this question: does Medicaid pay for funeral services, and if so, how much? And we talked a little bit about that earlier in the show. But do you have any figures for how much Medicaid will offer?
Yeah, so Medicaid, I'll first start with this. There's a lot of people on Medicaid. Not everyone qualifies for the funeral Medicaid benefit. So what happens is after a death, we call the Medicaid office and see if that person qualifies. If they do, Medicaid will pay $1,200 and towards the funeral, and then the family, Medicaid allows the family to contribute up to $2,700.
Okay.
And so depending on the funeral home, the situation, every funeral home offers maybe a little different, but typically it's a simple funeral, or maybe a simple cremation or a simple burial, and so it kind of depends. But yes, they do pay the $1,200, but you have to qualify for that benefit.
Right,
Yeah.
right, okay. And how do funeral homes handle situations where there's no clear directive from the deceased or their family? How do you go about that?
Well, ultimately, it does come down to the next of kin, what the next of kin would like. And so, whoever, is appointed that, or, whoever steps forward as a family member, we sit and we have a conversation. And we, as a funeral director, we try to lay out all the options that would be best for that family. And so there's a lot to consider. And that's why it's so important, why we tell tell family members, please have the conversation. Have the conversation with your parents and or grandparents, and try to get some kind of information. But usually when we're sitting with a family, we can kind of help guide them on what would be best based on, like I said, a lot of the different circumstances.
Well, and since you mentioned the family and so forth, what's the best way for a child of someone, an elderly person especially, or maybe even middle-aged, to approach the subject? You know.
Yeah, I think just very lovingly. I mean, I think just to have an honest conversation that says, hey, you know, we care about you, and we care about, you know, what happens, and we want to be good planners. We want to be responsible, and so let's have a conversation. I know it's hard, you know, acknowledging that it might be difficult, it might be a little awkward, but let's have a conversation, you know, about, you know, what you would like, so we can honor you, and it can also give us as a family, you know, the healthy grieving process that we want. And so,
Yeah.
And I find that it's one of those things that people don't want to face. It's a big scary monster under the bed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And people spend a lot of time and a lot of emotional energy avoiding that monster. But I find if you pull it out from underneath the bed and you stare it right in the face in the sunlight, it helps a lot. It's still a monster, but it's just not quite as scary if you face it and you talk about it and share that moment with the family, have the family help you do that. I think it really helps.
And I will add to that, Troy, too, that Mark, when families come in on a pre-planning and they're there to just talk about, usually that conversation is very lighthearted. You know, the pre-arrangement, a lot of times I'll hear laughter coming from one of our arrangement rooms, you know, because they're just talking through the details and they're remembering, and it feels good to kind of get it accomplished and and get it all taken care of. And yeah, it can, like I said, it can be very, very lighthearted. So. Well,
and that's a good thing. And I was going to ask you, there's a lot of emotions, I'm sure, involved when pre-planning funerals. And we're talking pre-planning, and I know there's a lot of emotions for at need. But how do you handle all those emotions? Are you able to help people sort these things out?
Yeah, I think first it comes down to being a good listener. I think second, it comes down to having a heart of service. You want to serve them. You want to come alongside them and walk with them. And I think that when people sense that, it helps. And for me, I feel like, being stable and trying to be calm, a calm presence, it really helps, and it allows people to grieve healthily and they feel comforted.
That's great. Yeah. We have another text coming in. It's from Matthew, and he is asking, calling from Fort Wayne, good to see that. Can you explain medical aid in dying, and do we have it in Indiana? And I'm not sure what that is pertaining to. Do you happen to know, Troy?
Well, I personally don't, which leads me to believe that maybe we don't have it. It is not a term I'm familiar with, but I don't know if you recognize it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't recognize it either.
All right. Well,
so my guess would be no, but it's something I don't know everything. It's something I'll look into.
Okay. Yeah, we might be able to talk about that in our next show.
Yes.
All right. And Troy, what advice, since we only have a couple minutes left, what advice do you have for families to ensure a smooth process when planning a funeral for a loved one?
Yeah. Well, we really try and avoid friction and reduce opportunities for there to be uncomfortable situations. And I think the pre-planning, getting everybody in the room and working through that, everybody knows why the decision was made. I think that's probably the best way to avoid that and help things go smoothly.
Okay. I'm sure as a funeral director you've had a lot of different scenarios. You've had people who have pre-planned, who have written everything down that they want. Yeah. And then you have families that are coming in like playing, well, I won't say it that way, but you'll have a table full of relatives who are going to be throwing their ideas in.
Yeah.
How do you wrangle that if you have more
Yeah.
than one person to talk to?
Yeah, it can be challenging.
Yeah.
It can. Again, I think it starts with just trying to listen, but it also starts with just experience is good in those, and leading and knowing what to say and what not to say, and mostly trying to keep everyone on track. You know, everyone is there for a reason, and you just step by step try to lead and get the planning accomplished.
Right.
And so, you know, we have a certain way that we try to go through and you know, in gathering information and talking about, you know, exactly what the family, you know, wants, but it can go a lot of different directions pretty quickly.
I bet it
So
can.
you got to bring it back.
Well,
Yeah.
gentlemen, we really appreciate your
Yeah.
expertise on this. And it's a topic not everybody wants to talk about, but I'm glad we had this discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Troy Kiefer, who is an attorney, and of course, funeral director Jarod Steffen, thank you both for joining us.
Yeah.
Hope to have you back again.
Yeah.
Oh, thank
Thanks,
you.
Mark.
All right. And remember, you can watch this episode as well as other Life Ahead episodes on YouTube and our website at PBS Fort Wayne. Until next time, all of us here wish you a great life ahead. Thanks so much for watching.
The preceding program on PBS Fort Wayne was made possible in part by
Beers Mallers, elder law attorneys, providing information on legal matters of guardianship and financial issues relating to nursing home care. Beers Mallers attorneys can also assist with Medicaid requirements and help navigate difficult family situations. Beers Mallers, attorneys at law, with offices in Fort Wayne, LaGrange, and on the web at beersmallers.com.